Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, a special Christmas edition. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals. In this edition, I am without my host, Seth Cox, because of the holidays. It's currently Christmas Eve night. I'm with my family up at my in-laws, and so we don't have the way to communicate. It's not nearly as easy to communicate. He's got his family things, I've got my family things, so I'm recording late on Christmas Eve. Christmas things are all taken care of, and before I get to bed, I'm going to record a show for you guys as the Cardinals are coming off of a great win, a 27-13 victory over the Seattle Seahawks on the road. And this episode 253, we will get into that. We'll talk about, we'll highlight some of the good things of the win. We'll talk about Kenyan Drake, his play, the potential of him coming back and getting a new contract. We'll talk about the injury to Kyler Murray and what that means for the season finale. Chandler Jones and his play. We'll look ahead to the Rams game for the season finale, and then, since it is a Christmas show, we'll talk about some Christmas wishes we have for the team moving forward. So let's go ahead and get started and not waste any time on this episode 253. This is the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, and I thank you as always for listening. The game on Sunday was their finest performance all year. 27-13, it had a little bit of everything, but it didn't come without a little bit of adversity to start, because they started out with a 3-and-out. They didn't look good offensively to start things off. Then defensively, Seattle came out in their first drive and just carved them up. Like the saying goes, like a hot knife through butter. There was no resistance at all. They scored a touchdown. They take a 7-0 lead. And here's the thing. Even the Seahawks thought the Cardinals would lay down. That was a comment made by right tackle Germain Ifedi after the game. They thought that after the Cardinals fell behind 7-0, being after that 3-and-out and that easy drive that the Seahawks had, they thought they would lay down, and they didn't. They fought back, and I think it came down to one big play. That very next play from the next drive by Kenyan Drake, 80-yard touchdown run, it changed everything. Because then offensively they were good, and defensively they were good, and they fought, and they did everything well. Some of the highlights from that game is that defensively they only gave up a total of 224 yards on the afternoon, and that was after they gave up 89 yards in that first drive. They held them to 1 of 12 on third down. The defense was absolutely fantastic. They held them to only 169 passing yards. They held them to 91 rushing yards. And yes, it is fair to say that their offense was limited. They were without their left tackle, Dwayne Brown, who is now going to have surgery. And as a result, Chandler Jones took advantage. 4 sacks. He was dominant in that game. And they also suffered injuries to their top 2 running backs. I mean, they already lost Rashad Penny to an ACL tear. Chris Carson got hurt. He had 8 carries for 40 yards. He got hurt, had a hip injury. He's done. And he's done for the season. CJ Prosise hurt his arm. He's done. And so they were left with Travis Homer. And the Cardinals really sort of poured it on. Nonetheless, they did the things that they needed to do. They took care of the football. They pressured Russell Wilson, they controlled the running game, and they ran the football. Kenyan Drake was marvelous. 166 yards on the ground. They got another 40 yards from Kyler Murray after he got hurt, and that's something that happened during the game. They got 35 yards from Brett Hundley, some key plays that he made down the stretch. But it was really fantastic to see how they went forward in that game. Defensively, Fans will say that this saved Vance Joseph's jobs. I'll be honest, I don't think his job has ever really been in jeopardy this year. But it finally looked like they put things together. They got the pressure and they got the coverage because their pass defense had been so bad all year, and suddenly they turned it around. It started last week against Cleveland, and Patrick Peterson looked like the Patrick Peterson of old. Now they didn't have a big time guy like Odell Beckham, but they did have him. It's at least early on. Rookie DK Metcalf, who's having a really fine rookie season. He's become a go-to guy for Russell Wilson, and he was targeted only once all afternoon and didn't make a catch. So if we're going to go back to the Patrick Peterson stats from yesteryear and things like that, what we find is he shut down another receiver. On the other side was Tyler Lockett, a guy who really is talented. He's been fantastic. He's been their number one receiver, been big plays. They held him to one catch for 12 yards. Things happen differently. And we'll notice something, and I'm going to kind of point to this. I don't know what it took, but Patrick Peterson playing at a high level changed the defense. I think this is what everyone believed would happen when he came back from his suspension in week 7. He would play at a high level and the defense would automatically improve drastically. But it didn't. And that's because he wasn't playing at a high level. For whatever reason, whether it was knowledge of the offense, whether it was physically just getting his legs back, being that it was a PED suspension, maybe it was getting used to playing again without the juice. I hate to throw that out there, but the fact of the matter is he was suspended for performance-enhancing substances. So clearly something happened. How long he's been on this, we don't know. That thing hasn't been discussed. But for whatever, so we're now at the end of the season. Peterson's playing at a Peterson level. What happens? The defense looks good. So they fixed the defense, and that's the thing, because the pass defense, even after his return, was bad. In fact, the numbers, Patrick Peterson's return, the passing defense numbers were even worse than they were for the first 6 games of the season. Now, the last 2 weeks, he's locking down receivers, and everything is changing. There's getting pressure, and they look like a dominant defensive unit. I don't know if they're going to sustain that, but at least this looks like, well, if we get Patrick Peterson for a full season next year playing at that level, maybe, just maybe, that's really the only change we need. So the offense seems to be in good shape. If the defense plays like this, my goodness, this is a competitive team. And it is fair. Seattle was ravaged with injuries. They were already missing 3 defensive starters, and then they were down other offensive starters. So they played without Jadeveon Clowney, their top passer. He's one of the most disruptive edge players that they have. They were missing Shaquille Griffin, their top number 1 corner. They're missing Quandre Diggs, their physical force and at safety. They were missing Dwayne Brown, their left tackle. Then they lost Chris Carson. And then as well C.J. Prosise, leaving Travis Homer. And so they were really limited. And so they were able to lock up the run game. They weren't hurt too bad by the tight end. They did give up the 1 touchdown, but they didn't give up a touchdown the rest of the game. They really defensively locked them down. They held them. They had 4 straight 3-and-outs in the first half. And they didn't let them come back, even though there was a little bit of adversity with the special teams play with the blocked field goal. They got good performances across the board. Kyler Murray was effective. Kenyan Drake was great. They didn't get much play. They didn't get much out of the receivers. Larry Fitzgerald was solid. In fact, that 21-yard touchdown that he had was fantastic. Brett Hundley, when he came in the game as well, it didn't mess things up. The rhythm was a little bit off, but he made plays with his legs to go forward. So there was a lot to like. In fact, there was very little negative that you could find out of this game, other than the fact that they didn't get anything from the receiver position outside of Larry Fitzgerald. In fact, they only had 15 completions the entire game. 4 of them went to Larry Fitzgerald, and then the rest of the receivers had a combined 3, 2 by Farrell Cooper and 1 by Demir Bird. Christian Kirk, their supposed number 1 receiver, was targeted 5 times and didn't get a single catch. He had a drop. It wasn't great, but we can't really complain. And Andy Lee, he had a couple of really good punts and a couple of really crappy punts. Again, we're nitpicking here. The offensive line played well. The defense played well. They stopped the running game. They stopped the passing game. Chandler Jones played out of his mind. He had 4 sacks, and he's up to 19 this year. And it was a complete dominant effort across the board. For whatever reason, it's coming together. And the season, what I'm liking right now is I wrote about this not too long ago. The Cardinals in their last coach, so when Ken Wisenhunt, they won 2 in a row at the end of the year. They used that momentum, even though there's some people who don't believe in momentum. But this is something that I think is real. The success late in the season with a new coach carries over into the buy-in in the offseason, and the momentum and the enthusiasm players have. That propelled the Cardinals in 2008 to their Super Bowl year. You go to 2013, the Cardinals started slowly under Bruce Arians. They started 3-4, and they win 7 out of their last 9 games. They go 10-6. They miss the playoffs. What are they in 2014? They start 9-1. Cardinals been streaky. They went the first month of the season without a win. They won 3 in a row. They lost 6 in a row. Now they won 2 in a row. I'm not going to say they're going to win this game against the Rams, but if they can, that 3-game winning streak at the end of the year, putting things together late, is critical, and I think it will give the fan base the juice they need to get excited about the team. It'll give the players and the roster just the kind of buy-in so that they're locked in early. Because that's the thing. The Cardinals were locked in early in 2008. In 2014, they were locked in early. If they can come in the next year and be locked in early, I'm not saying the Super Bowl team, but the Cardinals could be competitive next year. They could be a playoff team if they make the right moves and they come in locked in. That we'll talk about the offseason later on, but this is the sort of win. It was a signature win. It wasn't against a bad Bengals, Falcons, or Giants team like they won early in the season. 3 wins in a row is great. They proved Cardinals were not a terrible team. They're not a good team. They weren't a terrible team. They go on a 6-game losing streak. That was deflating. Then they started playing competitively again. Beating the Browns. Browns were falling apart, but a good team. Now defeating the Seahawks. They defeated a team that was in the mix for the number 1 seed. Moving forward, the Rams, we'll see what they have coming forward. So that was what there was in that game on Sunday. Coming next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We'll go into detail more about Kenyan Drake. What does his play mean? He seems to be a guy they want. What is that going to mean in the offseason? That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk of the web. And, on this solo show, let's talk about Kenyan Drake. Drake seems to be, he's making everyone forget about David Johnson, let's be honest. When he first got here, had the performance, David Johnson's coming back from injury, then there was talk. No one's talking about David Johnson anymore, and it's because Kenyan Drake has been putting on a show. He came on the stage, lit on fire, 110 yards against the 49ers. Then he had some pedestrian games, and that was all part of that losing streak. They didn't get him as many carries. He wasn't bad, but he was putting up kind of David Johnson numbers. But the last 2 weeks, he's been on fire. 137 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Browns. This week against the Seahawks, he has the 80-yard touchdown run. Then he goes for 166 and 2 touchdowns. He is now the team's leading rusher. He's only been with the team since week 9. He's now the team's leading rusher. He's their leading rushing touchdown. He's got 7 rushing touchdowns. In fact, with the rushing yards since week 9, since he came over, he and Derrick Henry of the Titans are the only players to have over 500 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns in that time period. And Derrick Henry's playing out of his mind, which leads us to the fact Cardinals are really high on this guy, and he's a free agent at the end of the season. Steve Keim was on the radio this last week, and said publicly he would love to have him back. You don't normally go that forward about it unless you really have the intention of doing it. And they said they traded for him, not necessarily, it wasn't just because Chase Edmonds and David Johnson were hurt. And they've done this before. I mean, when they did this when they traded for Adrian Peterson a couple of years ago. But they needed an option. And so by trading for Drake, they didn't have to give up much, but it wasn't just a short-term thing, they felt. Cliff Kingsbury was high on him for a long time, loved him in college. Steve Keim, when they found he was available, went and got him. They really believe that he can be the guy moving forward. Cliff Kingsbury's been nothing but absolutely praiseworthy of him, saying he's a perfect fit, that he does everything well. He's not talking about David Johnson anymore. He's an afterthought, which leads us to this. What's it going to cost? Because Kenyan Drake is playing like a guy who knows he can play and be a number one running back, and the Cardinals are using him that way. They have to bring him back, basically. But the question is going to be, what's it going to take in terms of financials? I wrote about this on Cards Wire, and I published this on Monday, and I did some comps. He's not going to get David Johnson money, but he's not going to come on the cheap. It's not going to be super cheap. So we need to kind of look at some of the comps over the last couple of years. Now, the high end is Jerick McKinnon. And now they're kind of similar situations. Drake right now has 205 touches this season, and he's probably going to get another 20. He's going to be looking about 220 by the end of the year. So it's a little bit more than some of the other guys. He's going to be 26 years old next month, so he's right in the prime of his career. And we've seen other running backs who have not had full-time roles then get a contract projecting them to be in that number one role. Number one, and this is the high end, Jerick McKinnon a couple years ago. He was coming off 2 years with the Minnesota Vikings with over 200 touches. And the 49ers go out and get him. They sign him for 4 years and $30 million and $18 million guaranteed. He hasn't played it down for the 49ers in the last 2 years, but that's the high end comp. That was a lot of money. They believed he was going to be a number one guy. $7.5 million per year, $18 million guaranteed. I don't think he gets that number because it's proven to be not a good contract. But that it could go that high. If you go, the 49ers also signed another guy last year in the same type of thing, and that's Tevin Coleman, previously of the Atlanta Falcons. He saw kind of a full-time role last year after Devontae Freeman got hurt. He had 183 and 199 touches in the last 2 seasons. He was 25 years old last year. He signed with the 49ers, 2 years, $8.5 million. Reasonable. $3.25 million guaranteed. Dion Lewis, and in 2018, he got a 4-year, $19.8 million deal with the Titans after a 212 touch season where he had over 1,000 total yards with the Patriots. You know, he's averaging nearly $5 million a year, and it comes with $5.75 million in guarantees. Duke Johnson's, it's kind of an interesting because he got 3 years and $15.6 million from the Houston Texans after he was let go by the Cleveland Browns, and more than $7.5 million in guarantees. And here's the one that was used the least, and many believe that Johnson was underused and underutilized while he was a Browns player. He never got more than 165 touches. And that's kind of the feeling with Kenyan Drake when he was at Miami, that he never was given a chance to be the number one, whether he was behind whoever. There was always someone ahead of him. And that was the case in college. He was at Alabama. He was not the number one guy there either. But obviously there were top running backs at Alabama. Now, so we're looking at the bottom end is going to be $4.25 million, with the high end being $7.5 million. He's 25 years old. He's going to be looking for a long-term deal, I'm sure. Kind of the target we're probably looking at is 4 years and $25 million. And probably $8 to $10 million guaranteed. So it's going to be a little bit more than $6 million per year. And that's reasonable for a number one back. It might be a little rich for some people's tastes in terms of what they got. But the problem is not paying is if you find a guy like Kenyan Drake and you feel he's a perfect fit in your offense, you've got to do it. Don't give him David Johnson money, but the problem is this. David Johnson's money is still on the books, and his contract is not an easy one to unload. You're already on the books for him of over $10 million next year with a cap hit of over 14. And if you cut him, you're gonna take a bath. You're gonna lose cap space because it's gonna cost you, because his $10.2 million is fully guaranteed, which means you're gonna be on the hook for that, plus the $6 million in prorated signing bonus money, which means it costs more against the cap to cut him than to keep him. You can trade him, and that's probably what you're gonna have to do. The question is, can you get anything for him? Now, on the bright side, no team is going to have to hit a team that picks him up. It's not going to be a $14 million cap hit. It'll be the 10.2. It'll be his salary only, and it will be fully guaranteed. The Cardinals are going to have to eat the signing bonus, so he's going to cost $6 million in dead money if they trade him. But unloading him will save them about $8 million against the cap. And if you're going to pay Kenyan Drake 6.5 or 6, I guess it'd come out to 6.25 is on the contract projection that I have per year, you're actually saving a little bit money still. You're unloading that contract, you're getting a guy you like more, and you're saving a little bit of money for a guy who's younger. For me, at this point, when it comes to David Johnson, this is what you need. If you can find a team that will take that contract, and all you need to get is a 5th round pick. If obviously you'd like to get more, but you can't expect more. The 5th round pick would mean this. It's going to have cost, because the Cardinals dealt a 5th or a 6th round pick for Kenyan Drake. It's probably going to be a 5th rounder. You get a 5th rounder back for David Johnson. You've essentially recouped your pick, and you keep Kenyan Drake, and you get to sign him long-term for a player that you like more. It's a win-win. In my opinion, that's a win-win. What you don't want to get yourself into, and Seth has said this, he thinks it might be a situation where you have to do a Brock Osweiler type trade, a salary dump like you see in the NBA, and that the Cardinals would have to send Johnson and a draft pick to get a draft pick back. The Cardinals are already down a couple of draft picks because of trades they made. They need to not have to unload it. Now, the other question is, well, they do have a lot of cap space. Could they potentially keep Drake and Johnson on the roster? It doesn't make much sense if in terms of managing the roster at running back. If you move David Johnson to receiver, that's a possibility. The problem is, and this is the problem, is David Johnson the same type of player as a receiver, as opposed to a receiver out of the backfield? We know he can run receiver routes, but how's he going to look when he's defended by actual defensive backs? If you use him as a running back from time to time and then swing him out, defenses are forced to treat him like a running back. But if he's a full-time receiver, he won't get that treatment anymore. So that's kind of the dilemma. Now, probably at Tampa Bay, it's a match made in heaven. You get him back with Bruce Arians, who knows how to use him. He can rejuvenate his career. They have cap space, and they have a need at running back. It's a match made in heaven. If you can get a 5th or a 6th or even a 6th, if you can get something, even if it's just a day 3 pick, you make that deal. And then you have to eat the $6 million of dead money. That's worth it. And maybe that's just the cost of doing business for this new offensive system, a new quarterback. But if you found your running back that you believe in moving forward, you've got to do it. Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. One of the issues that we had coming out of the game is Kyler Murray and his injury. We're going to talk about that coming back after the break. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And Kyler Murray got hurt in the 3rd quarter. It was his hamstring. He left the game. He didn't return. Brett Hundley closed it out. That's fine. So what is moving forward? Cliff Kingsbury said he wants him to play. These reps are invaluable. But at the same time, if he's not able to go out and be Kyler Murray, he's not going to put him out there. He's going to have to be 100% or be able to play at a high level to be out there. MRI comes back, just a minor pull. He's tweaked it. Kyler on Tuesday said that his hamstring's good. He's going to trust the medical staff. As of right now, he anticipates playing. There was no official injury report on Tuesday because technically it's a day off, but they flip-flopped because of the Christmas schedule. They practice on Thursday and they're going to, practice on Tuesday, have the day off Wednesday. There'll be an injury report Wednesday. Whether they base it off Tuesday's practice or what it would have been on Wednesday will remain to be seen. It looked like he would be called limited. And this way, Brett Hundley's going to get some first-team snaps. Kingsbury said basically the only snaps that Hundley's gotten all for the last several months have just been on scout team. And so he hasn't had any game planning snaps, and he did kind of a good job. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But there is a couple of ways you could go. And some people think there's no reason to put. So if he's even at all hurt, let him sit. There's no reason to sit and play him in that finale and risk to injure him further as he go into the offseason. Of course, Cliff Kingsbury doesn't see that. He says these reps are too valuable. Plus, it's a Rams team. It's a talented team. It's on the road. It's in a tough environment to play. A team that already beat him up earlier in the year. And so these reps in games are different than mental reps. They're different than practice reps. Game reps are the ones that matter. And to give him that experience only will help him moving forward. That said, you want to see him end of the season. You want to see him finish strong. But it would be devastating if he had something happen more and then he goes into the offseason hurt. Now, you can't. Now, that's the thing about football. I know very well you can't fear injury because injuries happen. And you can't not play a guy in a game you're trying to win just because you don't want him to get hurt. Unless he's at risk to get hurt. If Kyler's at risk to get hurt, it's fine, but he's going to take care of himself. The question is, what can we expect from him? Because the one time he appeared on the injury report, on Sunday, he didn't look himself. There was something off about it. So hopefully this doesn't carry over. Into what do I expect? I think he'll probably be ready to go. I think. We'll see how things go during the week. And more importantly, what you'll see is Saturday's the key day. Do they bring up Drew Anderson from the practice squad? If they do, then it's more likely that he sits. If they don't, they're comfortable with Murray playing. Even if, for example, if they decide not to start him, they start with Hundley and they have Murray coming off the bench. That's a possibility. I do anticipate that he plays. I do anticipate that he'll be able to finish the season. Which brings us to our next topic of, Chandler Jones. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. You're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Chandler Jones put together another stellar performance against the Seahawks. 4 sacks, 6 tackles, 6 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles. He now leads the NFL with 19 sacks. He now has 8 forced fumbles on the season. He now has 2 games of having 4 sacks. Something that hasn't been done since the 80s. Now, in fairness, he was going against a backup tackle in Jamarcus Jones. That's fine. 4 sacks in a game is still fantastic. It's still fantastic. You don't see backup tackles giving up 4 sacks all the time. It just is not happening. So while it was against a backup, he still did it, which puts him in reach. Now, what else can be said about Chandler Jones? He's been fantastic since he came here. He's now number 2 on their all-time list, and this is only his 4th season. That's it. It's a 4th season with the team. He set the franchise record
twice. 2017, he had 17 sacks. That set the team record. He blew past that on Sunday. He's up to 19. And now he's on reach for the league record of 22 and a half. He's going to have to get 4 sacks against the Rams. To do it, it's probably not going to happen. I'll say that. If he gets a sack, great. Let's get him to 20. I don't anticipate having a 4-sack game 2 games in a row, especially against the Rams, because, mind you, and you need to point this out, he, in the last 3 games against the Rams, he only has half a sack. That's it. Half a sack in his last 3 games. The Rams have been very good against him. Andrew Whitworth is a tough matchup. And so we'll kind of see moving forward. We'll see what happens. 4 sacks would put him in the record books. Now, is he Defensive Player of the Year? He definitely should be in that conversation. From everything I've read, it feels like Stephon Gilmore, Patriots cornerback, seems to be kind of the guy. But for what it's worth, Chandler Jones putting up these numbers does not get the buzz. You know, you get a guy with this number of sacks in a season, or even over the course of 3 seasons, you're talking J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald numbers, and those guys are Defensive Players of the Year. It's comical, the lack of buzz that he gets nationally. Now, of course, he's doing it on a bad defense all season. The Cardinals are only 5-9-1. They have a statistically bad defense. He just doesn't get the love. And so it could be seen as stat padding. But nonetheless, it should be kind of more impressive, especially because he's really the only threat that they've had. He's the only real good pass rushing threat on this team. 19 sacks is unbelievable. 4 sacks twice is unbelievable. What's even more incredible is the amount of times he's knocking the ball out. So he's got 8 forced fumbles. They haven't recovered all of them, but he's doing a great job in really every phase. And his mentality is great. I'm impressed with the way he handles himself. There is he wants the recognition, but he doesn't worry about it, and he doesn't worry about it publicly. Everything you hear, he's kind of soft-spoken. He's well-spoken, but he's soft-spoken. He just wants to do his job. He wants to help the team win. Of course he wants to get to the quarterback. And what's interesting is, if we notice kind of his best games, he's got the 4 sacks against the Giants, got the 4 sacks against the Rams, against the Seahawks. And if you look at what they had, he also had a couple against the Browns. What are the 3 games where Patrick Peterson played his best? It was those 3 games. He had the juice coming into his first game back against the Giants, and his last 2 weeks. And so Patrick Peterson's play is affecting Chandler Jones' play. I don't think this is by accident that when Peterson has been at his best, it has led to Jones being at his best. Which leads us, week 17 and then 2020, kind of the sky's the limit. Because if we get a full season of Patrick playing at a high level, combined with Chandler Jones, who continues to just be dominant pass rusher, this defense could be something fun to watch. I don't think that Jones is going to get the record. It'd be fun, but to expect 3-4 sack games in a season, I expect him to get one. He's basically good for 1 a game. A little bit more than 1 a game. That's kind of been the thing. He'll have 1 a game and then some bursts with a little bit more. I anticipate he'll probably have 1, maybe 2. So 2021, that's still fantastic. There haven't been many 20-sack seasons. In fact, the Cardinals have never had one, being that Chandler Jones has the 2 best sack seasons ever, and there's 19 right now and 17 in 2017. Hey, but you notice that he's got 17 sacks in 2017, 19 sacks in 2019. That's a little bit of parallel for you. You got to like that. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk. Let's look ahead and talk about the LA Rams, whom they face in Week 17. And let's see and we'll talk about that. coming up after the break. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We look ahead. The Cardinals play the LA Rams this Sunday in their season finale. It's going to kind of an interesting game. The Cardinals have a lot to play for. I mean, they have revenge on their mind. The Rams, on the other hand, have been eliminated. They're 8-7. All they're playing for is pride. And the question is, what type of team will the Cardinals get? Because they've been super inconsistent. If we go back to a couple weeks ago, while their playoff hope was still alive, they just got beat down by the Dallas Cowboys. Now, they were up for the 49ers, and they lost at the end. Demoralizing type of end of the game type thing, last second field goal. But now they're out. They can't make the playoffs. Are they going to look ahead? Are they going to want to finish the season? This is a team that's used to winning. And if they're not playing for something, are they going to show up differently? I don't anticipate it. Cliff Kingsbury doesn't anticipate it. And plus, it's a divisional game, and it's a team that they've beat up on. Now, I would like to point out the stat that the Cardinals have scored fewer points in the last 5 ball games than the Rams have averaged against them. They're getting beat by an average of about 33-7 in the last 5 games. They're not even competitive. It was their worst game of the season this year. It's been embarrassing in other weeks. And so, what can we expect against the Rams? Now, if we get a defensive performance out of the Cardinals that we did in the last couple of weeks, it should be interesting. Because if we look at the Rams this year, their offense, their rushing offense, so this has been bad the last 2 weeks. They ran for 22 yards against the Cowboys and only 72 yards against the 49ers. The 49ers are a team that you can run on. The Cardinals' rush defense has been improved. They've now, in 2 of the last 3 weeks, they've held an opponent to under 100 yards. The only two times this season they've done that. They did a good job against the Cleveland Browns, and Nick Chubb still ran over them for a bit. So they still gave up some rushing yards there. But the offensive production, it's been there. You look at the Cardinals gave up 549 yards to the Rams in their last matchup. The Rams followed it up with 455 yards against the Seahawks, but they were under 300 against the Cowboys, and they were back up to almost 400 last week, but almost all that came through the passing game. Defensively, though, the Cardinals have had success with running the football, and guess what? The Rams are vulnerable to that. Now, the Cardinals only ran for 74 yards against the Rams. Let's look at the last 4 of the last 5 games. In 4 of the last 5 games, the Rams have given up over 100 yards. But these are the totals. So the week before, when they played the Baltimore Ravens, Baltimore ran for 285 yards against them. Seattle ran for 106. The Cowboys ran for 263, and the 49ers ran for 110. This could be, if the Cardinals are going to hold to what they've been doing, they will keep this game competitive if they can manage to run the football and not get down too far early. That was the success that the Cardinals had against the Seahawks, is the fact that while they got down early, they responded. And then after that, the defense clamped down. There's a new development. Jalen Ramsey, top cornerback for the Rams, he's out for week 17. He's got a knee strain, and it's going to take about a month to heal. He doesn't need surgery, but they're holding him out. Are there going to be any other players that they do that to? That's going to be interesting moving forward, is to see what happens there. Now, what do I expect against the Rams? I'm not going to expect the Cardinals to win. I can see it happening, but I think the Cardinals are rolling right now. The Rams are going to... I think if the Cardinals show any fight, that the Rams will I don't know if they'll fight the way they will. So I could see a win. But I expect competition. If I had to pick this game, I think I'm going Rams 28, Cardinals 25. And it's going to come down to the end. Jared Goff is still putting up some good numbers. He's turned the ball over a little bit more, but let's keep it on Patrick Peterson. Because if he can play again, like if he falls up and he promised good play. He promised Vance Joseph that he wouldn't let him down again. So if he can match up with, if he can take Robert Woods out of the game, like he did against DK Metcalf, like he did basically against Odell Beckham, and if the Cardinals can stop Todd Gurley, that's going to force them to go elsewhere. Now, obviously, Cooper Kupp, both Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are over 1,000 yards, and Tyler Higbee, the tight end, has been fantastic the last several weeks. So those are still things to look at. But the Cardinals defensively look better. Whether it's Patrick Peterson's play, the subtraction of Terrell Suggs since then, it's going to be interesting moving forward. But that's kind of what I expect. Like, I expect to see the Cardinals fight. I expect a competitive loss, maybe a win to close out the season. And if they get 6 wins, which is kind of the high end of expectations that's where I had the Cardinals, about 6 wins. But I thought that they would have 6 wins at the beginning of December and lose their final games. I really like how this plays out, because if they can end up on a 3-game winning streak, that sets them up for next year. I mentioned that earlier in the show. I want to build into 2020 where this team is moving forward and Kyler Murray takes the next step and they improve defensively and they can be competitive, potentially be a postseason team in 2020. That'd be great to look forward to. Now, coming next on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talking about, we will wrap the show up. This is the Christmas show. So let's talk about our Christmas wishes for the team. That's coming next on Rise of Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Guess what? We are now set for Christmas. And this episode's going to hit on Christmas morning, Christmas afternoon, something like that. And so it's the time when we celebrate. We have our wish lists. It's a time for family. It's a holiday season. So happy holidays to everyone. But I did write a piece for CardsWire that's already up on the site. And so what are the Christmas wishes we have for the Cardinals? As Cardinals fans, what Christmas wishes do we have for our team? I listed 7. I think first and foremost, a great Christmas wish is simply just to win against the Rams. Again, to win 3 straight, to pick up 2 quality division road wins would be fantastic. It's big for the team moving forward. It adds to Kyler Murray's resume. It will probably allow Steve Keim and Vance Joseph and everyone to allow continuity. Say what you want about whether you think Keim should get fired or Vance Joseph should get fired. There is something to be said about continuity, especially when you're coming from a 1-year coach. You've got a rookie coach, you've got a rookie quarterback. See what they can do. I've always felt, I did feel last year, and you can go back to the old shows from 2018. I felt if Steve Wilkes was going to be fired, I thought Steve Keim needed to go too. That was based on what we saw before, because heading into this last year, they'd gone 3 years without the playoffs and only 18 wins. The last time that happened, their coach and GM were gone. That said, if Steve Keim's coming back, you've got continuity, get Vance Joseph's back. 6 wins, that gets everyone back on a positive vibe. Doubling their win total, looking good, Kyler Murray playing well, the offense playing well pretty much all season, and then the defense turning it around. That's putting everything in the right direction. And so the building blocks are in place. They need to make the right off-season move. So my number one Christmas wish is simply win against the Rams. Now, the rest of the kind of moving forward, I think every Cardinals fan wishes this. Let's get another year of Larry Fitzgerald. No one wants to see him retire, especially on losing teams. So their next Christmas wish is this. Let's get Larry back at least one more year and have that year be competitive. We know the end of his career is coming, but he's still playing so well. His numbers are down, but it's not because he's not playing well. It's not because he's playing poorly. It's because things aren't going his way. It's not like he's dropping. He hasn't dropped a pass all year. He's still the team's leading receiver. He's still probably going to have 800 yards this year. You can't fault him for that. So let's wait. Let's have him back another year, and let this next year be a postseason, so we can see him one more time in the post. He deserves it. We don't ever want to see him go, and especially the way he's playing. So definitely, that's our next Christmas wish, that Fitzgerald come back for another year. I think a lot of fans wish this. Let's get Kenyan Drake back. Let's re-sign him, see what he can do for a full season, but have it be on a regional level contract. We don't want a David Johnson contract, and I think we know Kenyan Drake's not going to get a David Johnson contract. But it'd be ideal if it's not a Jerick McKinnon contract either. So if he could be team friendly, keep it between $4 and $6 million. I think that the 4 years, $25 million is fair for both sides. And Cliff Kingsbury loves him. Steve Keim loves him. Kenyan Drake is proving to be a number one back who runs hard, who runs fast, who can run between the tackles, who can carry the ball and hit the big play and play with the swagger that you. So it's playing with both a swagger and a humility. The swagger on the field and the humility off the field. David Johnson lost that swagger on the field. He still has the humility, although he does seem more defiant. And that's understandable, but David Johnson lost the swagger on the field. Kenyan Drake's got that. So let's wish we get him back on a reasonable deal, because he really has propelled this offense the second half of the season. The next Christmas wish, it's related to the previous one, that we can unload that David Johnson contract without taking unload it and get something out of it. So can't cut him, can't be it. My wish is that they can deal him for a third or a fourth round pick, but I'm okay with a fifth. If a fifth's all out there, take it and run with it. You get out of that salary, you take a $6 million dead hit, but you've got cap room this year, and you're going to save money, and you can bring back Drake, and then you've still got a two-headed monster of Kenyan Drake and Chase Edmonds, whom you've seen play at a high level. So I think it's a good fit, and I think we'd wish that David Johnson would play better and could come back and play at the David Johnson level that he was in 2016. But we're looking at 4 years later, so if we're hoping for David Johnson to look like the 2016 David Johnson in 2020, without having to seen any of it in 2017, 2018, or 2019, I think now we're being just delusional. And that's not just a wish; that's a delusion. So at this point, at this rate, somehow get something for that deal. What other Christmas wish do we have? Well, let's resolve Patrick Peterson's situation. Trade him or extend him. Do one of the two. We can't have another year of limbo. Trade him or extend him. Trade him, because if you wait and you're competitive, you don't want to trade him during the season. You don't want to let him walk either for nothing. So if you're going to trade him this offseason. If you're not going to trade him, sign him a contract extension so that you know he's going to be with the team beyond 2020. And if that's going to be the case, obviously you want him playing at the top, at that high level that he's been. He can get back into that legacy Cardinal situation where He had the adversity, but then he comes back and becomes that great player again, that franchise player, that leader in the locker room. But resolve it. I don't think we want to do another year of, is he going to go? Is he happy? Is he unhappy? Anything like that. And then lastly, the biggest Christmas wish is this: that they have a good off season. We've had too many mess-ups. We've had too much drama the last year between the Steve Keim DUI, the arrest of Darius Philon, the DUI of Ron Miniger, the trade request for Patrick Peterson, the apology, the suspension, the unhappy with the team. Let's have a normal offseason where it's just acquisitions and cuts and trades and draft picks, and have some of those be good. They've got cap space this year. They don't have a blank check. They don't. But they've got more money than they've had in any year that I can remember, and make some significant upgrades. Re-sign guys that you want to keep. Add a couple of defensive pieces. Go out and land a big defensive lineman. Do something. But have it be productive. We've had too many off-season misses, whether it's for and you can't fault the Cardinals, can't fault Steve Keim for some of the misses that they had this last year. Robert Alford, maybe, I mean, he was hurt last year, but you can't expect a guy to break his leg. Darius Philon, he didn't have any character problems before, so the arrest that he had was out of the blue. So, but let's have a drama-free off-season. That's the final Christmas wish. And with that, I will just wrap up this edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess. Thanks you for listening. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. As this is the final show before the final show. So the next time we have our show will be next week. It'll be with Seth again. We will talk about the season and the off season. So we'll probably have another show next week, and then we'll see. We'll talk about what's moving on forward with the off-season schedules. I think I might have a few more shows that I do by myself, kind of add shows to the off-season. But until then, thanks for listening. I've been doing this show for long. Those who've been listening forever, appreciate you. Those who are new to the show, I do appreciate you. I'm your host, Jess Root. Thanks for listening again. Merry Christmas. Go Cardinals, and we'll be back again next week.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise Up Red C, be Red C-Red, and of course, Rise Up C-Red.
Roll!